clubpod.co, clubpod.co, clubpod.co.
Hi folks, this is another clubpod.co podcast and podcasting type thing. That's clubpod.co. Now, there's a little subject I came across. I was listening to some talks on podcasting, and by the way, I've got the dogs in the background, so if there's any noise, it's them moving about. There we go. Oh, it's the cat coming in now. Now, there was a chat, and it was more of, I bet this little madam's, go away, you little swine. You're going to knock the mic out. Well, come over. Sorry. Go on, over there. That's it. Great, everything's knocked. Hi, folks. This is another of these clubpod.co podcast things I do. That's clubpod.co.co. Now, I was listening to a room about it was on the old Clubhouse, and they were talking about podcasting. Now, there's quite a few of these groups, and most of them claim to be helping podcasts, and all they are is really just people coming on promoting their rather dull podcasts. I'm going to say that they sound as dull as this one. They're the usual, oh, I've got a podcast on inspirational women or inspirational, boring. Yeah, no one's going to listen to. Sorry, be honest. And they just want it, and you can. And I know no one's interested because you look at their Instagram followers and it's like 30 people. Now, right, if you're not bothered about getting many people, that's fine. But the trouble is, I think a lot of these people thinking they're going to get millions of views and they're going to be the most inspirational thing to a lot of people. It's not. But, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I mean, as long as you're not expecting to be... the trouble is they do talk as if they're going to get a lot of viewers, and I think that's what, we're going to do this and that, and I don't think it's going to be as exciting as they think. But anyway, I wouldn't want to put anyone off. But everyone under the sun seems to be doing these so-called inspirational podcasts, we're all of love and inspire, and basically they just say super all the time, super. You can always tell the types, super, that's so super and so inspirational. Ooh, inspirational, super. Anyway, they were talking about on this, and they were giving out more tips than most of them. The smaller groups in Clubhouse seem to be a lot better, to be honest, than the big ones. The big ones are just come across as big promotions for somebody's website or service or whatever. And they were giving out tips, and there was one woman, she was saying how she gets viewers, and they were discussing tricks to get more people. So they'd put little clips on this site or that site, and it got people onto it to listen to more. But again, and this is a point, I'll give the guy credit. I won't say his full name in case he doesn't want the publicity. But he's posted as Glen. Now, he pointed out something really interesting. He was saying that before he did podcasting, he was a webmaster, which is that sort of thing I basically started off with, but not as talented. I mean, I don't want to call myself a webmaster because I won't be as knowledgeable as this guy. I mean, he's clearly knew a lot more than me, a lot more. I probably know 1% of what this guy knows. But it was talking about how years ago he was talking to a client who was, I think she'd been on TV, and that alone had got a website, a huge amount of traffic, and she couldn't understand how it wasn't converting. And what he was pointing out was traffic isn't necessarily great traffic, and what he was saying was very interesting, and this is something I think a lot of people need to think about when they're doing podcasting, or any other website you've got online. It's okay getting what his argument was. You could get a million people on your site, but if they're going on your podcast and they're thinking it's boring, they're just not going to come back, and they're not interested. Yeah, you'll be sat there going, "Oh, I've got 1 million views. Oh, they're very exciting." Because in the same time, someone else was saying that they did a podcast years ago, and that was very popular, and they've never had a podcast as popular since, and yet it hadn't occurred to them that if they were very good, the figures should go up. You should never really be in a situation where your figures go down. A bit like a TV show. You don't expect, if a TV show's good, the ratings should keep going up and up and up, because people tell each other and people come back. I mean, you know as well as I do, if you went on a TV show, you're going to watch every episode if you like it. A bit like I looked on Netflix, and there's some brilliant comedies on there, and God, there's some dull ones. There's some lame ones that I watched one episode, possibly two, to see if they improve, and that's it. I couldn't stomach any more. While others, I've sat and ended up watching the whole series, going on till like 4 a.m. and not getting sleep, and that's the downside of these things. I had to watch them all. And so, if your stats are going down, then you're actually not producing something good. And so and I think the tone in the room sort of slightly changed, because the woman who was speaking, who was boasting about almost tricking people. I'd use the word tricking, because she were playing things about trying to get people on it by saying she'd go on TikTok, which I think was, she had some good ideas, by the way. She did things like TikTok and I think Instagram, where you can do live shows, and then constantly should be telling people to go on the podcast. So there might be a subject, and basically she wouldn't say it fully on the TikTok or the Instagram show. She'd say, well, if you want my full statement or whatever it was, listen to my podcast. Now, she's doing, I mean, this is a problem. If people aren't going back voluntary and you're having to trick people all the time, you've got a problem. And I think this is and I don't want to say that's what he was saying, but that's the impression I think he was saying, was traffic shouldn't be something you have to trick people into doing. It should be almost organic in some ways, and you should see the same people coming back and back and back, because you're producing content constantly. And if you're not, that's the point you question things. So if there should be a point that, let's say you've got 10,000 listeners or whatever, make a figure, but it might even be 1,000 or even 100. At that point, you shouldn't need to promote it, or you should go for a while, just see if you went, say, a couple of weeks and you're not promoting it, your viewers or listeners should not go down ever, because if they do, you've got a problem. I mean, depending how they go down, they shouldn't naturally increase. If anything, they should be telling others. But if you start finding you get, say, 1,000 people listening week one or first episode, and then the next episode you launch goes down to 500, and then 400 and 300, you should be going, oh dear, something's seriously wrong, because that should not happen. Inflating, if you're artificially inflating people by just begging people, which unfortunately I think this is what people are doing. They're asking out, they're running around like headless chickens, panicking. I mean, they do this all the time on Instagram and TikTok. They go, follow me. I mean, they're doing it on Clubhouse. Follow. You know, that's not the same as people wanting to follow you, just following you for the sake of it. And the trouble is, and again, this is what I'd argue, what you could argue. I mean, I don't know if this is what he was saying, but I'd put forward the argument that if you're begging people to follow you and you get to 10,000 people following you, that is not the same as 10,000 people organically following you, who you've never needed to ask, promote or anything, just because they like you, or there's something you're providing they want to listen to or watch or see. That's a huge difference. If you pay, you could go online and pay everybody in the sun to promote you in a different way, and yes, you could build up 10,000. The trouble is, they're not worthy of anything. I've seen this on YouTube. You'll see some sites that have got hundreds of thousands of followers, and yet the viewership are literally like 30. I've gone on there and I've watched them, while others have organically just grown massively, and that's the difference. So when we do talk about, I thought I'd do this now because I think it's an important thought, that because I think a lot of people are, if you're coming on there, you're probably wanting tips to promote your podcast, and you're probably wanting to do it almost artificially, bump everything up, get hundreds of viewers or people on, just so that you can feel better about yourself, thinking you've succeeded. The truth is, you could have you could build up 1 million followers, and yet for your podcast, and yet you might be less effective than, say, somebody with 10 viewers. And I think Glen even gave this example, or someone else. I've heard it a few times from a few people. You might only have 10 viewers or listeners or whatever. However, if they convert, they're more important than, say, having a million who are just sort of turned on and then turn off again. So let's say your podcast is on car maintenance, and you only get 10 listeners. Those 10 could be the types that go out and buy the equipment. There could be other mechanics. Or let's say you talk about cars. You might only have, say, 10 people, but if they're the 10 that'll go out and buy whoever, say, Fords or Hondas or BMWs or Audis or Citroens, or name any car company. Maybe it's one that I've never heard of because there's some popping up. Let's say the new Tesla. If they're the type of people who are going to go buy the car, they're for an advertiser. And this is something advertisers themselves are going to have to think about, because if they just go purely on this person's got 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million viewers, and they're thinking they're more worthy of paying, I'll pay them 100 grand to advertise my product. In reality, that podcast would actually be worthless to them, and the one that has only 10 viewers could actually be more profitable, because basically you're advertising to people who are going to buy and who are really interested, because them 10 people might be listening each week or for every episode, however times this comes out. So let's say you're a mechanic and you're talking about, and it could be quite technical stuff that only other mechanics would understand and listen to. However, they're the ones that they're seriously into it. So if there was some device that a mechanic would find useful, but you only have a limited numbers, they're still more important than, say, that to 1 million people who aren't mechanics. So if I was to, for the general DIY person, none of that equipment's going to be, because it could be hundreds of thousands of pounds to buy, and you might need a big garage, like a massive garage, to fit it in, say, one of them things that lift cars up and down. Your normal DIY isn't going to buy one of them because they just simply don't have the room or money to have one. In fact, that's quite an example of the quality of traffic. And the other side of it is, and one of the things I've compare things to is YouTube, where I've listened to ones on I've listened to the shows on YouTube where people have talked about camera gear, and you can tell there's real life experienced camera people who are experts in that. They'll have spent all their life been working for a firm, so there might be that they'll tell you they've worked on major movies, or or they've been hired out for some TV work or something or other. And so when they talk about camera gear or recording gear, sound gear, they've been using it, and they know what they need from it and the limitations, and and when you listen to them, people who are in the business are going to take them more seriously than, say, somebody who's just thinking, oh, I'll get some freebies, and they manage to build up 1 million viewers on YouTube. And yet they'll tell you about the equipment. They'll say, oh, look, this does this and this does that. But in reality, they don't understand if any of that's going to be any use to anyone. They don't know. They're not sound engineers. They might know the software. They might know everything under the sun about it. But because they've not gone out and worked on a film or in a radio studio, whatever, they don't know if that's, realistically speaking, would be some use. And therefore, even though they might have 1 million more views than the first person, the advertising, giving them gear or anything, just wastes of time, because the people who are buying it, who would be the professionals who would buy this professional gear, aren't going to listen to this guy, even though he's got millions of views. And this is where traffic becomes quite interesting. And it does. This is a major, and it's going to be quite. I mean, because there's quite a lot of sites out there now just getting wanting advertisers to buy spaces on podcasts, but in reality, if they don't themselves understand the difference between quality traffic and just numbers, then they're fleecing people in some ways, because it's worthless. It's worthless advertising. They're just a numbers person thinking, oh, that matters. It doesn't. And that's what this guy was arguing, and it was a very important factor. I mean, I don't know if he's got experience in marketing, but I think what he said there was one of the most significant things. Whatever you're doing, in both, doesn't matter if you're an advertiser or a producer of content, this matters, because you don't need to. And I think I've heard a few others actually state this. Just having 100 listeners could be more important, more significant than having 1 million, if it's the right people. Because who cares if 1 million people are just listening, but if they're not going to be buying the gear, no intentions of. I mean, you could put this in the most purest way of saying, well, it'd be like having a cafe in Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, London, right? A single place where it's only there. It's nowhere else in the UK. Maybe just in one town in the UK, and having and you're doing a podcast of YouTube video on it. Now, if all your viewers, you might have 10 million viewers, but if none of them are even in the UK, nor mind in that town, so let's say you've got a cafe in Hull. If you haven't got a single viewer in Hull, then it's worthless. That doesn't matter, because it's not going to attract any more customers to you, because if all your viewers are, say, in Sweden or America, they're not going to jump on a plane to come buy a bag of chips in your cafe in Hull. However, if you've got just 5 viewers and they're in, say, less than a mile of your cafe, then they're worth far more, because they're more likely to come to your cafe, if you see what I mean. That's the benefit of quality traffic when we're doing this. And so, if you're going to an advertiser, there's no reason you can't go up and say, look, I might not have millions of viewers, but the people, and if you can prove it, the people who are listening are the ones who are going to buy your product. So there was talking about somebody, the niche one. You see, this is why niche podcasts or niche websites. There's an expression. I'm not sure what it is. I heard somebody say it the other day. Let's see. I can remember niche. Let's see. No, I can't find it. There was an expression. Apparently, that's an American business thing about niche making money, and it has been. It's been. We've talked about this for websites. Niche does make, because if you can niche something up, and I think somebody was doing a podcast on a particular American car from the 50s or something. Now, that's not going to get millions of viewers, but this guy, I'll say guy because it was a guy, was apparently getting all the fans of this particular car. Now, that, you might not have a lot of viewers, but they're the ones who are going to buy the parts for it. So if he was selling or servicing these cars, people are going to go to this guy. If there's a particular part, this guy could sell you it, and if that's what he was doing, I wasn't sure if he was selling parts or doing anything, I'm just simply talking about. But let's imagine he was selling parts. That was his little business, and all his business was, let's say, supplying parts for this particular 1950s American car that maybe not a huge amount of people have got. However, people who've got that car, and there'll be people, it won't just be in America, there'll be people in the UK and probably other countries, because I know if you go around the UK, there's people who buy American cars. Then they'll order from him even if it takes 6 months to deliver or something. They won't care, because he'll be the one who has the parts. And so even though his audience might be small, it could give him enough business to be a very successful business, because he could be constantly supplying and seeking out parts. And this is why sometimes niche markets are better, because there'll be parts you won't be able to get on Amazon or the big companies. And the trouble is, you see, everybody sells the same product, but they don't niche. Everybody sells the same, I don't know, USB cables or whatever. But if you're selling something that is limited, because it's like there's more, you've got more chance of selling it because of the internet. Well, in the old days, you'd have been stuffed, because that guy, if he was that fan, if he had the car then selling parts, the likelihood only people in his area are going to buy parts from him, and if there's only one other person in his area, that means that's his only customer. Anyway, that's like I say. So to summarise, traffic isn't always great. It's where you have to basically work out if your traffic's good or bad, and this podcast basically we could argue there's two issues: junk traffic. So you might have millions of viewers, but are they going to be any use to an advertiser? Are they going to buy the product? And the second one is, are you basically are your results staying the same or increasing? Because if you're simply begging for viewers, and you're still seeing your rate, the numbers not increasing, then you've got a problem. Or if, should I say, you shouldn't be, if you've got 1,000 listeners, you should be at the stage where if you stopped promoting yourself, because there are a lot of these podcasts saying, constantly promoting, and that's a danger. If you have to constantly promote, then you've got a danger, because you're clearly having to find newer listeners if your numbers aren't shooting up or going up much, because you're not really succeeding if people are going on for 1 or 2 shows and then not bothering coming back. Because if you're constantly saying come listen, and you're thinking, I've got steady 1,000 viewers each week or each month, they're not coming back. So even though in your head you might be thinking I'm a success, in reality you're a failure, which, to be blunt, because you're always having to drag newer people in just to keep bumping up the viewers, and eventually you'll burn through them. There won't be any more. And the trouble is, and this is a big danger, when people have come, and if they don't like your show, they won't come back again. And even if you improve and you move things about, the likelihood is they won't come back. And so it's better to get things done correctly now, making mistakes early, rather than going out getting thousands of viewers and then in a few years, thinking, oh, well, that's it. Because it's a bit like a shop. If you know your customers now, and I've said this to a few shop owners, they think that, oh, well, if in a few years' time we'll just change things and then get all the customers back. They don't. They've moved on to somebody else. In fact, talking about shops, I knew somebody who had a beauty shop, a health shop, doing like nails and things. And I sent people to this shop. Unfortunately, she had this idea of, instead of being open 9 to 5 p.m. or even later, it'd be closed certain days, certain mornings or whatever. And so when people went, because they didn't bother booking, they just drove up. They'd be shut. So what they did was they'd move on to the next shop that did nails, and that'd be it. The likelihood is they'd stay to, they'd form a relationship with a new shop, and that other shop, the first one, it's now shut. I don't know if it's because of that, but you've got to understand that you can't be so big-headed that you can just annoy customers and expect them to come back again, because the moment they move on to somebody else, it's a bit like this lockdown. I don't know if in York where you are, but we've got this. Well, it's not really a lockdown, because people, the bulk of people, you still go on the roads. People going to work. We've just got this pretend lockdown where all we've done is we've forced pubs and certain shops to close down. Now, all that's happening now is people are going to the supermarket to buy everything, or online. Online keeps getting the blame for taking away customers, but to be honest, in the UK, most supermarkets now will sell everything. So you can buy your clothes there, your electric goods there, your household gear, as well as food, all in the same roof. You're not having to pay to park. You're not having to. Often it's easy to get to because they're local, so you're not having to. You can avoid the speed cameras and all the unpleasantness. You're in and out, and it's all under one roof. Now, no one's then going to go, when these shops open up, are going to go back to these shops. I see people in there buying the beer in bulk. They're not going to go to pubs and be told, oh, you've got to walk around with the mask on and be treated like garbage. But it's just not going to happen. People just stay at home. And so what's happening, what you'll find is all these companies, some will have worked out that they're going to go bust regardless once the lockdown's over. And by the way, let's be realistic, and I'm going to go off subject here. If you're under 80 with no health problems, it's very unlikely you're going to die. Most people who've died under 80 have had health problems, and let's not pretend that just because in the news it says this person's not had any underlying health conditions does not mean they're not unhealthy. It's a bit like a footballer who's gone out running and dropped dead because he didn't know he had a heart problem. Just because people don't know they've got health problems doesn't mean they don't have health problems. And it also doesn't mean that just because it's not recorded. There was a woman who was huge. She was only young, she was 20, and they said she had no health problems. The woman couldn't walk because she was so overweight. She had health problems. So, and by the way, a lot of the masks people wear in the shops aren't medical grade. I see a lot, and I laugh at people because They pretend that they think that these bits of, well, they're like children's knickers they're wearing. They're nothing more than that. They're not medical in most cases. Medical is something like N95 grade. It's what the doctors and nurses wear. And when they wear them, they're usually correctly fitted. And if they have a beard, they have special ones for beards and all sorts. And they sometimes, I think that from what I've heard, is they usually have somebody else put it on for them because that way they're avoiding touching the face. The ones people wear in shops tend to just be basically a single layer of garbage. And I think now they're stating, I think many countries are now admitting that they just pretend. I think they have like a 5% impact. It's not a 100% no use, but. And the other side of it is the material ones you're supposed to wash, which no one ever does. So basically they get dirty and then the air doesn't flow in or out anyway. It goes through the sides of the gaps. So they literally do. In some ways they're worse than not wearing one because you're constantly touching your face. And the other side of that is, and I know I'm going off subject here, is when you go, people then think they're safe and they're safe to others. So they go to the old people wearing these pretend medical masks. And then because they're doing no use, they go into an old people's home. The old people then get the virus and then die. So they're almost pretending these things are some use is actually putting people at risk. But anyway, that's going off subject. Total waste of time. I mean, I don't wear them. I mean, I just say I'm exempt. It's a complete waste of time. I mean, in the UK, they think you're supposed to. Some of the shops say, "Can you wear this silly badge around your neck?" And like I've said, well, would you ask somebody who was black to wear a badge around the neck, or somebody who was gay? No, it's ridiculous. Sorry, I've got medical. I mean, I don't play about this garbage. Sorry. And I know that upsets people. And they go, oh, boo hoo hoo hoo. Oh, you should be scared like me. I'm not going to be. I mean, a lot of these people in 10 years once... and the virus won't go away, by the way. I mean, there's a lot of people lying. First of all, in the UK, we was told that doing this lockdown wasn't to save lives. It was to... Well, I don't believe it was. I think the wording was to slow it up. I think that's been the notion. It's unlikely it'll save anyone's life. Very unlikely. The most it'll do is slow the spread. And I think that was the aim originally. Although they're trying to now, they've switched it to try and save lives. But it's unlikely. And by the way, I think from what I've heard, others have said it, is that those who've died of the COVID would have died anyway within a few months. There's, we're talking about a lot of times very elderly people. I mean, I heard on one, and it was bizarre. You see, people think they've got it in their head now. People don't die. There was a woman whose mum was 95 who died of COVID, and in the papers it said, "Oh dear," she was saying to people, "Oh, you should all wear your mask because if my mum hadn't got it, she'd be alive for many more years to come." The woman was 95 and frail. She might have died from just having the normal cold. So I get a bit irritated by this nonsense because basically and I always say this, a woman who's senior years, months ago, this was before they were making masks you haven't to wear in the UK. She was going, "Oh, you should all wear them." And I said, to be truthfully honest, we're doing this lockdown and children are going to commit suicide, which apparently they're now doing. I think in some places they've had to open the schools up because kids are just suicidal. They've given up on life. I mean, children who were talking about going to university have literally now said, well, what future have we got? There's no jobs now. They've been destroyed with no future. It's over. I remember even 12 months ago, give or take, I was talking to a lad who was working in a shop, and he just said, and he wasn't Mr. Cool or anything, he just said, I've given up. I mean, he'd given up then because he said, I should be going out night clubbing, and they've taken it away from me. They've taken my youth away from me. It's all right from these people, they've done it, but I've now no youth, and I could see that, and this was almost a year ago. And then you've got people of losing their businesses, which will result in them losing the house, families breaking up. Oh, it's going to be a complete. I mean, I say this now. If people think this is bad now, oh, this is a holiday period. We're on a holiday. In a year's time, that's when things start getting bad. When people start losing jobs and everything, and that's all you're going to hear. You're going to hear suicides. I mean, I'm going to say this to you guys. You're going to find that there'll be somebody. This is going to be something, and I don't exaggerate. I suspect a lot of people know somebody will have committed suicide. The rate of suicide is going to go up and up and up. It's unlikely. I mean, we might come out of this and it might just go, the economy might recover in both UK and USA. I don't think it will. Mainly because I think, first of all, the high street's going to be destroyed. I don't think we've already shut down all the major shops. They're being closed down. And they're the ones that, they attract customers to the little shops. So the little shops will suffer because there won't be as many people going out. And it's like pubs in the UK. They were struggling before this lockdown. I can't see people wanting to go to pubs now. And I think pubs, it'll be. I think a lot of pubs will just shut because once it's opened, people are going to be too scared to go out. I can see people still feeling smug and wearing these masks in 10 years because they'll think, you've got there's a certain type of person who likes to feel smug and likes to go, look at me, aren't I wonderful? I'm doing the right thing. You're all evil. I'm better than you. I'm wearing a mask. Look at me. And there is when I go out, people stare at me. I've had a few, and I just stick 2 fingers up at them, which annoys them. I mean, I go, it's like I said to my friend, these people live in fear. They're too scared to come near me. I've seen people, when I've walked the dogs a few months ago, they don't do it like now, but a few months back, I saw young families who'd just jump and they'd fall down the hill as they're walking past me as I'm walking the dogs because they believed that they were going to die. This is young families because they've got it in their heads. I mean, I've known people who've got mental health problems and now don't leave the house and never will. It's ridiculous. People are just not going to leave the house, but some people never go back to work because they're living in fear. It's changed the psyche of everything. The whole thing will just. I mean, we're now in anyway. That's me going off wall. But anyway, that's the end. But if you want to go onto the podcast, it's clubpod.co. Clubpod.co. All right then. Ciao.
Clubpod.co. Clubpod.co. Clubpod.co.